A top-level Marvel antagonist has often led to some of the most popular movies and shows ever, and it seems like that is definitely going to be the case with Gorr the God Butcher in Thor: Love and Thunder. And so with that in mind, it's time to find out who the greatest of all time are. As we take a look at the top 10 best villains in MCU history, keep in mind though that these are not ranked in any particular order. Kicking things off then, we have the Scarlet Witch. No matter what we call her, Wanda, Scarlet Witch, one of the Maximoff twins, there is no doubt that recently she has really jumped up there to become one of the best Marvel villains ever. We've seen a gradual evolution of the character, starting with Avengers Age of Ultron and ending recently with Doctor Strange in the Multiverse of Madness. I will admit it does seem unlikely that this movie is the final swan song for this major character, but even if it was, what a way for her to go. She was the key factor in some of the scariest scenes in Marvel history, and for that reason alone she will never be forgotten. Let's take a trip back to Wanda's actual debut for our next villain, as this is Ultron. Designed of course by Tony Stark and Bruce Banner, this maniacal robot was originally designed for good, to act as a peacekeeping artificial intelligence. As we all know though, things definitely didn't go to plan. Ultron did in fact deem the human race to be the biggest risk to peace on Earth, making it his mission to end them, including the Avengers. Originally assisted by both Wanda and Pietro Maximoff, he combined both vibranium and Chitauri technology to create a device capable of lifting the capital of Sokovia up above the Earth with the intention of dropping it and wiping out all of humanity. Ultron as a villain is simply mesmerising. Every time he appears on screen he is incredible, and although it was pretty much a guarantee that he wouldn't make it past the end of the movie, it's truly a shame we haven't seen more of him. Here's hoping though that the multiverse is able to bring him back in some way. From one Avengers movie to another though, as this is of course Thanos. There are very few villains in the history of Marvel more well known than the Mad Titan. His destruction at the end of Avengers Infinity War ensured that he would never be forgotten. There's never been anyone in MCU history who has had more of a long-lasting impact than the owner of the Infinity Gauntlet. 50% of life in the universe gone in the blink of an eye. There is a reason Doctor Strange describes this as being able to destroy life on a scale hitherto undreamt of. Thanos' victory following his collection of all 6 Infinity Stones is something Marvel fans never thought they would witness. We always expect our heroes to stop whatever threat they are facing, but Thanos was just too much for them. The Avengers truly needed to assemble on a scale that we'd never seen before to take him and his army down. And as we all know, it made for one of the greatest scenes in MCU history. Let's take a trip back in time to the birth of the MCU and Obadiah Stane. The first ever MCU villain is still one of the strongest to this day. Tony Stark's right-hand man certainly had some ulterior motives. Working very closely with the Ten Rings, the one person Iron Man believed he could trust was of course the person pulling the strings behind the scenes. From the shadows, he was of course trying to create his own Iron Man style suit. His model would of course look very different, and upon its completion he would become Monger. Luckily for fans of the billionaire playboy though, his numerous attempts to assassinate Tony Stark during this movie were failures. Even with that being the case though, it didn't stop him being an awesome two-faced villain, and for the first ever in the MCU he did a great job. From Iron Man to Spider-Man though, as this is Mysterio. Another of the greatest villains we've seen in the MCU, and another antagonist that on the face of things doesn't necessarily have anything special to offer. No superhuman abilities, no mystical powers. However, his biggest talent that makes him one of the greatest villains ever is his ability to manipulate and deceive. Peter Parker would come to learn that Quentin Beck was definitely not who he portrayed himself as. Spider-Man trusted his story, which showcased him as a dimension-hopping hero who had travelled through the multiverse to save this version of Earth. In reality though, he was a former Stark Industries employee combining illusion technology with weaponised drones in order to convince the world that he was the next big superhero on the level of Iron Man. It was extremely refreshing to see a completely different modern take on this villain that had the ability to convince all those around him he was truly on the side of good. From one Spider-Man villain to another, as this is Green Goblin. There are very few enemies of the Wallcrawler more famous than Norman Osborn, and to actually get to see him in the MCU with our current version of Peter Parker was insane. In some ways he played a very manipulative game just like Mysterio and convinced Spider-Man that he was actually on his side before betraying him, leading to the death of Aunt May. I'm starting to think that maybe Peter Parker isn't a very good judge of character. It was a very good job that Peter was able to get some serious help from alternate universe versions of Spider-Man, because without them, trying to take the Green Goblin down would have been extremely difficult. As we all know though, in this case he wasn't alone. Norman Osborn was accompanied by a couple of other dangerous villains, and so the triple Peter combo was 100% needed. For another absolute classic, we have Loki. Let's be real here, this legend has to be treated very differently in terms of a list of Marvel villains. He may have started off as an antagonist but quickly transitioned into one of the most loved characters in MCU history. Even after his villainous attempts to declare war on the Nine Realms and also become the ruler of Earth with the assistance of the powerful Chitauri army, he somehow found a way to make us smile. He moved very quickly from antagonist to hero, and as far as the Marvel fanbase is concerned, there can never have too much Loki. He may not have been the most successful villain in terms of enacting his devious plans, but there is no doubt he was one of the most loved. You could probably say something similar for Killmonger. Former US Navy SEAL Eric Stevens had one goal in Black Panther: to take the throne of Wakanda from T'Challa. And he was successful, at least temporarily anyway. Defeating the King of Wakanda in ritual combat, he took his place at the head of the table. Fortunately, T'Challa was able to return and claim his throne in their final fight, defeating Killmonger, but it didn't make him any less of an amazing villain. His talents and skills in combat were clear for all to see, and his journey to the throne took him all over the world. He may have been of Wakandan origin, but there was only one true king, as all Marvel fans knew: T'Challa, the Black Panther, and he was willing to give everything to ensure the safety of the people of Wakanda. Taking things in a completely different direction, we have Alexander Pierce. We would come to learn in Captain America the Winter Soldier that the snakes of Hydra had managed to infiltrate S.H.I.E.L.D. to the highest level, and Alexander Pierce was the head of that very snake. Attempting to take control of the entire world by using Project Insight to assassinate people all across the globe, his betrayal of Nick Fury almost led to his death. When you combine this with his direction of the infamous Winter Soldier, he was a true force to be reckoned with, but not necessarily in the same way as other Marvel villains. His power didn't come from abilities or otherworldly strengths, but from influence and his control of others. Hydra had returned in the worst possible way, and only Steve Rogers with the help of others would be able to stop it. His ability to pull political strings was second to none, and it nearly led to the end of the world as we know it. Thanks to Cap and the gang though, America lived to fight another day. And then finally, let's take a look at Hela. Thor Ragnarok saw the arrival of one of the most powerful villains ever. Hela, the older sister of the God of Thunder, was a force to be reckoned with. She planned to rule Asgard, but when its people refused to bow to her, she set about executing those who didn't support her. Even after the return of Thor, flanked by Valkyrie and the Hulk, it was not enough to defeat her. Only bringing about Ragnarok was enough to end her reign of terror. The destruction of Asgard was the only way to defeat this god-level villain, which makes her one of the most powerful of all time. She was a key part of what made Thor Ragnarok an incredible MCU movie. When combined with the amazing story, top-level characters and hilarious comedy, it was a recipe for a masterpiece. And that was the top 10 best villains in MCU history. Don't forget to like the video and subscribe to the channel, and I will MC you later.